Hello and welcome to day number 7 of my 12 birthday countdown. I'm Dr. Tasia White, and today's hard truth is about vulnerability. When it comes to vulnerability, I always saw vulnerability as a weakness, and that has to do with many different factors. For example, just thinking about my upbringing and my family dynamic, I come from a blended family, which has given me the unique opportunity of being the only child on one side, but then the oldest of 4 siblings on the other side. And so, because of my younger siblings, I always felt this desire or this need to set a good example for them. Additionally, on my mother's side of the family, I had the distinct pleasure of getting to know my great grandmother, especially when I was younger. And she would always remind me that I was her oldest great grandchild. And because of the opportunity I got to have with getting to know my great grandmother, who was this amazing woman who did so many things for her community, I always felt this need to also have that same kind of presence. When I look back, I've always had some kind of leadership role going all the way back to when I was in junior high school. I would help with planning events. I was part of the peer leadership program, which are things I've talked about on my podcast. Even within my family dynamic as I got older, I was the president of our investment group at one period. On the professional side, my very first job outside of college was supervising people who were pretty close to my age. And that has just continued to progress. And so I share all of that to say that leadership is so important to me because of these values that were instilled in me very early on in my life. However, I never saw leadership and vulnerability as being compatible. I always had this impression that to be a leader, you had to be strong, you had to know everything, you had to be this presence that was respected. And I quickly learned, especially after college, that that's not necessarily the case. And it was a very humbling experience supervising people because it showed me that leadership is multifaceted, which I talk about a lot in my podcast. However, I was still grappling with this concept of vulnerability and really couldn't shake it. While I understood humility and the importance of being able to admit when I was wrong, apologizing when I did something wrong, and just holding myself accountable, those were things that I learned early on in my leadership development. However, the vulnerability piece never really clicked until about 3 or 4 years ago. I remember I was doing a live on one of my Instagram accounts, and I said something along the lines of, I hate crying in public. And one of the people watching it was a mental health counselor. After the live, she reached out to me because we had a pretty good rapport. And she was like, hey, I saw what you said about crying in public. If you want to talk about that, I'm happy to explore that with you because it's okay to cry in public. It's okay to be vulnerable. And I feel like that was the moment when I decided I need to explore this further because clearly there's still some unresolved issues related to me feeling like being vulnerable, particularly in a public setting, is considered a weakness or a negative thing. And so I did invest some time and explored some experiences from my past that contributed to this idea of vulnerability being a weakness, and was ultimately able to work through them with the help of different resources, including working with a counselor on determining where those feelings came from. And thankfully, I feel like I've moved past this idea of vulnerability being a weakness. That's one of the reasons why I feel comfortable sharing it in this countdown, because it was a hard truth that I had to work through, knowing that I worked through it was an experience I had last year. I think I shared in my 2024 countdown that I had worked in HR for a retail company, and unfortunately, they eliminated my position. And so when it was time for me to leave, I did a farewell tour where I visited all of the departments, said my goodbyes, and wished everyone well. There are moments when I was literally in tears, hugging my colleagues while people are shopping in the store, just surrendering to the emotions that I was having at that time because I really didn't want to leave. And I feel like if I had not done the work previously, there was no way I would have been crying in front of my colleagues or in front of customers. If anything, I might have tried to fight it to the point where I was getting physically sick, or I might have even avoided the experience altogether and missed out on the opportunity to say goodbye to some really great people. And it would have robbed them the opportunity to express their gratitude. And so I feel like that experience was a good check mark in terms of my growth from being totally uncomfortable with being vulnerable, especially in public spaces, to now being 100% vulnerable in front of people that I worked with as well as total strangers. While it took some time, I've eventually come to appreciate vulnerability as an opportunity to build connection as opposed to being reserved and holding myself back. And so ultimately, there is value in being vulnerable when it's done appropriately. And that value is better connections with people. We are human beings, and so naturally we want to connect with others. And that's something that I eventually had to learn, and it definitely got easier along the way. But I feel like the part that was most challenging for me was just opening myself up. Now I feel much more comfortable doing so, especially after the experience I had with my last job. And so I share all of this to say that I feel like there is still this negative connotation about vulnerability that exists, especially on social media. There are people who want to have this facade of my life is perfect, everything is going well, and nothing bad happens to me. And I just feel like that's not true. That's not realistic. I've found that people are much more receptive, or they feel more connected to you when we are vulnerable in a genuine way. That is today's hard truth. I will see you here tomorrow for day number 8.